Welcome to the Playbook. I'm Chris.
And I'm Bridget, and we're here to talk about all things pop culture and sport. On this week's episode, we're going to be talking about scrutiny in the media. So we're going to be looking at Daly Cherry-Evans and his contract scandal, Chappell Roan and her recent comments on her Call Her Daddy podcast, as well as the Matildas and the state of the beloved team that we have.
Here's Cherry-Evans. Here's Tom Trebojevic. Comes to Edwards. Back for Cherry-Evans. He's done it. He scores. The record breaker gets a try. And he boots it onto Pittwater Road.
All right, so what is going on with Daly Cherry-Evans? What's going on with his contract? Why is he in the media so much? What's happening?
Well, he's been here for like 15 years. He's on a $1.3 to $1.4 million contract at the moment.
Jeez.
Which is kind of crazy if you think about it.
Yeah.
36 years old, and he's played about 350, 360 games in the NRL. So we have seen a lot of him, and he's also an icon in the NRL.
So has he been injured recently? Is that what's going on with his contract? Are they ending it because of his age? Because if he's been there for 15 years, that's a fair amount of playing time I'm gathering he's had.
Well, let's talk about the contract. So what we do know is that last year he was supposed to finish up with the Eagles. So 2024, 2025, we know that his contract is finishing this year, but if they were going to offer it, they would have done it then. Nothing had happened. It was complete silence for 3 months. And I think now at this point, he's kind of feel like, there isn't that much respect, at least this is from what I've seen, that the Eagles are going to give him. So he's decided, you know what, I'm going to come out. I've played for this one team for 15 years, but I'm going to leave it, either hang up my boots or play with another team. So we're not too sure where he's going to go with this.
So has he approached other teams? Have they said that they're looking into getting him? Because I know if he's been playing for that long, he'll have, the contract on him will be quite high.
Well, the Eagles, I think one of the reasons why last year they were not willing to offer him a contract is because they were like, well, if other teams offer you, then we'll think about giving you something. But at that point, because he was still locked into his contract, he hadn't been having any offers from rival teams, so he kind of was on zero. And so the Eagles were like, you know what, we're not going to give you anything because we haven't heard you say what you're worth.
That's a really messy situationship.
Yeah, it really is. I know, it's like giving ex-boyfriend wanting to come back.
Yeah, it kind of is. So what exactly does he do from here? Because if the Manly Seagulls don't want him, where are they going to go?
The Eagles or him?
Both. Without a captain and without their most capped player.
Well, this is why there's been such a media storm about him, because he's been playing for ages. He's only missed actually 23 games of his entire playing career, which I think is kind of crazy, and 9 of them were for State of Origin. So if you think about that, he hasn't had many injuries. He's still in, I'd say, peak form at 36, which is quite rare to see in an NRL. But there are teams out there who would definitely want a halfback in the NRL for them. And we're talking about salary cap. It might be difficult for him to get what he's currently worth on the market, 1.3, 1.4. But when he made that announcement the other day, the Eagles were trying to claw back their reputation a bit and give him a quick offer, which was 1.4 for 2 years. So half what he's looking for at the moment.
Oh, so that's his salary contract for the whole year.
That's what they offered. They weren't going to give any more because salary cap, which is kind of crazy because he's their captain.
Yeah.
So it's kind of shit.
But then they could afford 3 or 4 players on that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's 3 or 4 junior players, you never know.
Has it been a change in management there, or is it still the same people?
Same management. CEO came up the other day and was talking about their decision. They said that they didn't want to be, I suppose, blindsided at anything, or that
By injuries?
By injuries, by players coming round. And I think DCE has decided, you know what, I don't want to wait around for an offer. I've played with them long enough. And you would think that for him as a one-club man, it would be something that he would finish his career on. But I think at this point it's too difficult to make reparations on both sides. And his agent could be looking to put him to other teams, Roosters, Dolphins, we don't know.
Okay, are you still close with your friends from back home?
Yeah, I am. They're really awesome. We have such different lives. A lot of them are married with children. I don't know when that's going to happen for me. I don't know when that is realistic, if ever. So,
do you want that?
Get married and...
Yeah.
Part of me is is it even going to be legal to marry? I don't know. So, but kids, all of my friends who have kids are in hell. I don't know anyone. I actually don't know anyone who's happy and has children. at this age. I have like 1-year-old, like 3-year-old, 4 and under, 5 and under. I literally have not met anyone who's happy, anyone who has like light in their eyes, anyone who has slept.
These are not looking too good.
So that was Chappell Roan on Call Her Daddy. So there's been a lot of scrutiny online, and it's starting to leak into the media as well about her comments about parenthood as well as her politics. And I think it's a really good case in point to look at differences between valid criticisms of artists and people in the public eye versus basic scrutiny. And especially, like, she is quite a controversial figure. She has made a bit of a name for herself for being, I don't know if the word is correctly, unlikable, but she's definitely
She's
not.
a force.
She is a force, and at times that has made her quite a figure in the media. So talking about her comments, whether or not they were societally acceptable and, you know, were widely accepted by the majority of people, I can't say that. Not a place for me to say. I'm not a parent. But her comments about parenthood were quite interesting in how they've been received. Especially online, a lot of parents were saying, you know, that's not my version of parenthood. Why would she say that? And then it delved into the conversation of women not having children and how society perceives that. But where a lot of the controversy lies as well is in her latest statements in the podcast about politics. So Chappell, prior to the US election, she was very, very politically active, talking about anti-Trump rhetorics, about the legislation that Trump was going to put in, heavily criticizing the Biden-Harris administration as well. And it's very interesting to see now she's had a complete kind of 180.
It's like a backflip, right?
Yeah, it was really interesting about her own politics, and she's become a lot less politically active, despite in her Grammys Awards acceptance speech where she was talking about healthcare and rights for people working in the music industry, which I think is a fantastic talking point.
If I ever won a Grammy and I got to stand up here in front of the most powerful people in music, I would demand that labels and the industry profiting millions of dollars off of artists would offer a livable wage and healthcare, especially to developing artists. Labels, we got you, but do you got us?
But post that, she's been quite offline as well. But the comments that she made was talking about, you know, why would you come to me about politics? I'm just a pop star, which is kind of very hypocritical when you spent your entire late part of 2024 talking about politics.
Yeah. Well, do you think it's disingenuous for her to say this now kind of feels like a backflip to you? Or do you think there's a line in which pop stars shouldn't actually say anything?
I think it's really interesting because I think if you're going to talk about politics, you need to be political the whole time. You can't stop and start. You can't just stop and start. You can't talk about the things that benefit you or disbenefit you correctly.
Like cherry picking.
Yeah, you cannot cherry pick topics, and especially as a white queer artist, she has a massive platform. She should be using that to talk about politics, and she was. And now she's turned around and gone, oh, well, don't come to me. I'm just a pop star.
I don't have the answers.
I don't have the answers. And it's like, well, you were advocating for the answers previously. It's unfair for you to completely do a 180 and go, oh, sorry, not me. And it's really disheartening to see. But when that's lumped in with stuff, which I think personally is invalid criticisms about her making comments about parenthood, a lot of mothers online took that directly to mean about motherhood. It wasn't. It was just saying, you know, the people that I know that are parents, they're not having a good time. They don't make it look fun. And there's been a lot of discourse online about, especially from parents who have lost children, to say, actually, yeah, that's really valid. There's one Australian influencer, Veruca Salt. She unfortunately lost her son at, I think, 6 weeks old.
Yeah, it was really young.
Very young to something that she had no control over. And she was saying, yeah, actually, people do make parenthood look hell, and it's really unfortunate. I lost my son. I would give anything for him to have a tantrum in front of me. I would give anything to have a rough, sleepless night because it means I had a child. And obviously I'm not a parent. I don't really get to comment on stuff like that. But it makes it really hard to have a valid criticism of someone when the comments are taken out of hand. They're taken incorrectly, and then they're used to almost push an agenda of childless women are unhappy and they're mean, when that's not exactly what she was saying. But I think online scrutiny versus valid criticism is a very, very fine line that you have to walk. And it's hard to do that in the media when you're such a big public figure as well.
Yeah, I think there's a line between, you know, what I suppose your personal agenda that you have as an artist and there probably is a lot of pressure for her as well to make sure that she doesn't say the wrong thing or says the right thing. But at the same time, you know, everyone's human, and if you have an opinion, you should stick to it.
Yeah, you can't backflip at 180 on a Call Her Daddy podcast where Alex Cooper herself had said this was very unplanned. So clearly I don't think her PR team had much to do with it either. And I think for someone of Chappell Roan's stature and as well as the view that people have of her in and out of the public eye, I think she really needs to do some more PR training because those comments were not taken lightly by the general public at all.
A lot of celebrities think they need a little bit of PR training.
Oh, God, PR training would be so good for everyone.
21-year-old Courtney Vine at her first World Cup can write the Matildas into history. Cue the party! Wild scenes in Brisbane, the engine. Tony Gustafsson cannot keep the tears back.
That was the Matildas in their height of the success following the 2023 World Cup. How have they gone since then? Like, what's going on? I know that Sam Kerr has been off for quite a while, I think more than a year. What about the rest of the team? How's everyone doing?
Yeah, so where they're at right now is a very low place. Right now we're ranked 17th on the FIFA ranking scale. In 2017, we were 4th.
That's crazy.
We've not been this low in 20 years. Like, it is really unfortunate. And I think there's a massive list of factors that we'll go through about why this is. And I don't even know how we overcome it. First off, we don't have consistent coaching. We have not had a consistent coach
Since Tony Gustafsson
left. And it's really unfortunate. We've missed key coaches that have just come out of contracts. But Football Australia just does not want to work with our women's team. Not sure what's going on. We don't have a coach for our highest level national team. We also don't have a coach for our young Matildas, which is under 20s, or our juniors, which is under 17s. That is 3 levels of national women's teams that we do not have coaches for. We don't have coaches for. I don't know how you don't have coaches for 3 of your major teams.
Yeah, what's going on there? Like, what's the hold up with the money, or is there a contract there? They're not offering enough? Like, who would be the next one in line, do you think, that would be best suited to coach the Matildas?
Honestly, I don't even know because a lot of the major coaches are in contracts currently for at least another 2 years. So the coach they've got at the moment, he's lovely. He's great. He's worked with a lot of previous Matildas. He was their coach, I want to say, in 2009. So he's known a lot of the older girls in the team. But it's still really unfortunate to see they don't even have a technical director for women's football.
What is a technical director?
So technical directors, they organise internal comps, external competitions, as well as pathways from our juniors to youngs to, you know, official Matildas teams. And the woman who held that previously, her name is Ray Dower, she actually was the under-17s coach as well. So not only was she organising all of the technical side of organising competitions and friendly matches and international games and all of that, she was also coaching. So we're already down 2 positions, let alone our young Matildas team coach and our, you know, all ages coach. So it's so disappointing to see Football Australia's just lack of drive to fix these issues, because I can almost guarantee you this wouldn't happen if this was a men's team.
Yeah, I think we ought to talk about that, like the scrutiny of women's sports and men's sports, which has come a long way, got to say, from, say, the NRL to soccer. I remember watching the State of Origin, right, for the NRL women's in 2019. They had 1 game. Bear in mind, men have had 3 games for who knows how long.
Yeah.
But they had 1 game in Leichhardt Oval. I was there with a friend. And from memory, I don't know what the stadium attendance was. Probably no more than 15,000. Even that might be a bit, you know, much to ask for. But at the end of it, it was super cool because everyone in the fans basically got to go out onto the stadium, meet the players, shake their hand, and I got a couple balls signed from Queensland and New South Wales. It's pretty cool. You don't get to say that, you know, every day. But, like, I think there's still so much more that we have to fight for in women's sports when it comes to representation, you know, scrutiny, beating that, having coaches, having the funding and the representation that we do need so that the women that we love across all these sports get that viewership.
Yeah.
And get the fans and get the attendance, because, like, how do we combat that?
Well, I think it's really interesting. The Matildas is about the only team that is where the women's teams are more popular than the men's. I don't think that's the same for our A-League teams for the women's soccer. It's getting up there, especially because there are a number of Matildas players who still play in the A-Leagues. They haven't gone overseas yet. Up until recently, there was, I think, 5 or 6 that were playing in A-League competition, so it made it a lot more accessible to meet the stars.
Yeah, true.
But, yeah, it's really interesting that the Socceroos are not facing the same level of scrutiny as the Matildas. In fact, I remember after the 2023 FIFA World Cup, it was very interesting because then we're having a look at the men's team and going, well, why are you doing so well? And there are definitely differences in competition. The men's team, there's pretty much every country has a men's team. Not every country has a women's.
Yeah.
The men's teams are a lot more funded. They're much more well-funded. They have the facilities there, especially in developing nations. Women's soccer teams are either not there or they're not being funded at all. Like the Nigerian team had to crowdfund for the 2023
to get them
FIFA Cup.
across.
Yeah, it's ridiculous that we're still at this stage. But I think the Matildas team is genuinely the only one where the women's team are bigger than the men's.
I also can't really name any of the Socceroos apart from Cahill, and I think he left, right?
Yes.
Like he's retired.
Yeah. And it's interesting to see that dynamic shift, but the women's team has a lot more scrutiny about their position. I can't think of a time where the men's team have cracked in the top 5 or top 10 in FIFA rankings. In saying that, we are up against a lot more competition, but the women's team have been there. We've been at, semi-finals of Olympics teams. We nearly got to the finals of FIFA, the World Cup. It's great to see where our women's players are going, but you can also see where things are going wrong. We are not funded correctly and we're not having the same personnel involved. It is so sad to see that this team that was so highly regarded, like they stopped our nation. When the
really
World Cup was here, it stopped, and it got so many people involved in women's sports. Like the amount of women going back to soccer, back to sports that they enjoyed afterwards, where they weren't dropping out at 12, 13, they were keeping going, was fantastic. Seeing young women involved in sports again was just phenomenal. And I really, really hope that now that Sam is back, it gives us a morale boost to get back out there.
Yeah, especially would you say it was like 517 days or so since she's been there?
16 months, yeah.
16 months.
It's so long. And it's sad that one person is the head of morale within the team, but I'm really hoping that we're going to see a turnaround. In saying that, to have that turnaround, we need to have the coaching staff. We need to have the funding. We need to have people wanting and willing to be there. And that's a problem at the moment.
Well, also, I remember recently I went to, it was like an International Women's Day conference and Lydia Williams, who we know and love,
Queen.
Former goalkeeper of Matildas and only very recently hung up her boots, shall we say.
She was amazing.
She's been there from like day dot, I'd say. And she gave a keynote speech where she was talking about the idea of legacy and what we can do as fans or athletes on the other side of it and how we maintain legacy. One of the things they spoke about as well at that keynote was the idea of funding. And she actually mentioned, now correct me if I'm wrong or not, but the Matildas actually went on strike a couple of years ago, right? Because they wanted to get equity funding with the Socceroos.
I think they were having to wash and clean and buy their own uniforms. And I don't think they had funding for the players to travel to places, and they were having to pay for their own hotels.
So guess what the average Matilda salary was in 2015?
I'm going to say about 35,000.
Yeah, it was 21.
Oh, Jesus.
21,000. Now, guess what the average Australian salary was, average worker at that time?
65.
Pretty close. I think it was like 60.
Wow.
So you can see the difference. Like, people, just an average Australian was earning more than 3 times what a Matildas player was, like a national Australian representative, which is kind of crazy. And I think part of the reason why, they went on this strike in 2015 was to fight for equal pay with the men, better working conditions. And how are we, supposed to invest in women's sports and get that funding and viewership that they deserve if the funding isn't coming from the top level? So part of the reason I think that they went on a 2-month strike, they fought for better pay, better conditions. The pay included travel accommodation, more junior development opportunities for their players and airfares. And I think because it was 2 months and it was long enough for them to really say something to Football Australia, it was successful. And Lydia Williams, who was part of that, delivered that keynote address at the International Women's Day conference that I was at recently. And, you know, she was talking about the importance of fighting for your rights as a player, as an athlete. A lot of the time when it comes to, we were talking about earlier, NRL contracts, everything is so individual and you don't really get the same protection that you do if you're not in a team. But the Matildas coming together, they were able to fight and get more than just, you know, $21,000, which is not enough for living conditions. But yeah, now the Matildas, where are they?
Yeah, so they're about to head into some more friendly matches. We're up against South Korea, I believe, on Friday, and that'll be the first time that we've had Sam Kerr playing for us.
Is it confirmed that Sam Kerr is playing this Friday? I know that she was in the training camps, but it has been 500 days, so how confident are we in her joining us?
Ooh. It's rough. I'm not 100% sure until I see the lineup, which will come out Thursday night, Friday morning. I wouldn't be surprised if she's not on the starting lineup, but is later on down the track put in. Tony Gustafsson used to do this wonderful thing where it's 70 minutes, he'd sub every player on and off, and then we'd have a completely different team on.
I remember seeing that in the World
Cup. So
Cup.
Frustrating. I don't know why he was doing that, but in saying that, it sort of worked a little bit at times. So yeah, not too sure if she'll be playing. She's just come off a massive injury. So she's coming off the back of an ACL injury, which those are hard to recover from. And while she's been cleared for her team at Chelsea in the UK, I still think for a friendly match, it's likely she won't be on. If she is on, I suspect it won't be for that long. In saying that, she has got some public redemption to do. She's not the most favoured athlete of all time at the moment in the Australian media due to her recent legal scandal in the UK. So we can maybe see this as some sort of an apology tour. If she wants to play more to apologise to the nation, I am well here for it because I think it would be amazing to see her back in, especially with the players that she's so used to playing with. Her, Caitlin Ford, Alana Kennedy, all of them, like Macca up the back, fantastic.
Razzo
in there.
I miss Razzo.
Yeah, especially I think it'll be really interesting seeing where Razzo goes because I know there's some stuff going on with her Spurs contract.
Yeah, I was wondering what that was.
We're not really sure. We've tried to research this. No one is saying anything.
No one said anything, but
like she's kind of disappeared from Spurs. She's taken all the posts down and changed her bio so that Spurs is no longer in there. We're not too sure what's going on. She had a crappy time at Madrid, moved to Spurs. Everyone was really excited to get more playing time and now she's just kind of not there. Obviously, Gori has just announced that she's had to medically be withdrawn due to an ankle injury, which is very unfortunate because I know everyone's looking forward to have Minnie on the team. So, yeah, it'd be really interesting to see how we go on Friday. But, yeah, they are at the moment under a lot of fire, especially for their recent performances. And it's, again, that line between where scrutiny is valid and where it just becomes bashing, honestly, because Australian media especially loves to bash on women's sports. The second that the women's teams don't perform to the standard that they want them to,
people just leave.
That's it. Yeah. Online, they're being bullied and harassed. You know, Ellie Carpenter faced a lot of online cyberbullying from missing several different points during the FIFA 2020.
Yeah, there was a couple goals, I know.
There was a couple points where she wasn't playing at her best. But at the same time, when the men's team doesn't play at the best, you don't see that on national media. But this is because this is the first time we have a women's team that is bigger than the men's.
And they're so elite too.
They are elite. They're fantastic. And I'm forever defending them. But there is a point where you need to also be able to validly criticise them. And I think at the moment these girls need to hear the valid criticisms and not the bashing because that's a problem. They're starting to become public figures that are allowed to be bashed. And that's not fair. Thanks for listening, guys. On next episode, we're going to be talking about salary capping in the NRL and how that affects the teams and leaderboards. And we're also going to be talking about some fun little recession indicators.
You can follow us on Instagram at officialplaybookpodcast or the links in the show notes.